Well, you can see there's some changes going on here, right? Clouds are pretty dark. Gonna get some rain maybe. And my hay fields are all ripped up. What's all that about? Well, I guess very simply I'm out of the hay business right now, and probably will be for the duration, as I've leased these farm fields off to a local farmer. And the first thing they did is take a big old chisel subsoiler and go rip the field up, and now they have a whole bunch of rock and stuff to pull out before they can hit it with a disc and plant corn. And all my hay equipment is now that. Basically, I traded all the hay equipment, the balers, the rakes, the tedders, all that stuff, and ended up with a big Kubota side-by-side. RTV 1140 CPX power steering, diesel. But what it does have is room for a bunch of saws, so now I can come out and play instead of come out here and work all the time. And that's a hydraulically operated dump box, and I can take the tailgate, open it up, and dump out a load of rock or a load of wood. And it's got some pretty aggressive tires, which is good, and it has a tow hitch, which I find interesting. We may have to put that to use. Really not sure how strong a machine it is. I don't believe I'm going to use it for a tractor. But here's the dump box control, up and down. Handbrake. Not sure what that is yet. We'll figure that out over time. But seems like most of what I need to do is in two-wheel drive, medium or low. You know. What do you think? It's got a kind of an interesting feature where if you see that hinge right there, you can fold the dump box to be that long, and then this is a back seat that can fold down, and now you can carry more people while it has the extended roof. You can make this like a little bus. And not sure I'll ever use it for that, but it's got that capability. Yeah, so I guess over time we'll talk about this Kubota. Things I want to know are, can I get through all my woods? I think what we're going to do today, just for the interest of video, is I have a road that's quite muddy. Go back down and take a ride through that road and see if we can get through in two-wheel. And the second thing I want to do today is talk about some of the stuff here in the back. Yeah, I think part of the theme, there's going to be a couple of themes for the year. Obviously, I'll probably do more logging. That's something that has to happen. I've got about 5 more years of logging to do on this place in order to get to where I want. But then I also have to start producing firewood, right? And as far as the logging saws are concerned, this year I'm going to rely more on the 585 than I did before. You know, I bought it, I might as well use it, right? Really love the saw. It's an easy starter, has power I need. And, you know, there's going to be a variety of 572 builds. Pretty much obsoleted for me the 562. I just need the extra snap, you know. But I have so much 562 material that I have to do some of that, and I'll build some 562 class saws, I guess, for firewood, but also to review some of the things we've learned since 2011 building these things. You know, I'm watching a lot of the videos come out now where they're kind of reinventing the wheel, which is fine. I think it's cool. Every couple of years someone else decides to take that challenge and move it forward. There are some things I've learned about the 500 series though, and I've peppered this information through many videos, so I'm not going to go into some kind of a educational rant. Just going to point out that they are a different design. The cylinder is a different design. The transfers, picking up heat underneath the exhaust is done for a reason. So a lot of the things that the conventional chainsaw builder type using conventional knowledge thinks is reality isn't. They react a little bit differently to modifications. That's number one, partly because of the shape of the transfers and partly because of the thermodynamics of them picking up that heat. And you'll notice they have tiny carburetors. So one of the things you can do is increase carburetor size. We may do that. Done that in the past. And another thing about these is they're built to very tight tolerances. So clearances, I pointed this out way back in 2012-13 era, where when you start setting the cylinders down lower, trimming the base or no base gasket builds, you really got to pay attention to the flange and also the interference of the transfer port covers. So we'll cover some of that. I have another little trick up my sleeve that I used to do, and it has to do with rod angles. And I don't know, maybe we get back into that some for fun because I got the material. I might as well use it again. And then of course the other theme, other than logging the 500 series Husqvarnas, is one that really was the beginning of the roots for me, and that's vintage saws. Now vintage has changed in 20 years. When I first got into it, vintage saws were Homolites, right? The 925, stuff like that. Of course I've got those, and I've got the McCulloch ProMax 60 we're going to put time on this year. But the other vintage saws are the John threads. I've always been interested in those, and even before I met Bob, and then once I met Bob and he had the store and all that, it was a common interest. He's really added a lot to my collection, like that 70E right there, and one of those, not both of them, but he added one of those, the 455, to the collection. And just the whole litany and the evolution of saw design through the 70s and into the 80s I find interesting. Of course, this was one of the first saw builds I had on the channel. I mean, that was years and years ago, and that thing still goes. I have ignition issues with it, trying to find good ignitions for that 2-coil system that Husky had, John Thread had back then, early 80s. I struggle to find good coils, and the aftermarket options simply have not performed well. Forget about these guys. If they don't have spark, you're in trouble. These, I guess, same goes. I happen to like the 154 series, the 254, 154 series. They're fun. And this one right here is no exception. But the reason why I'm kind of going there is for small saws. One of the first videos that we had done, Bob and I had done, was the concept of, do you get a cheap, new pull-in class $300 or sub $300 saw? Is that the best option for this kind of work? Or sometimes if these pro saws are available that are old, what about those as an option for the same kind of money after you put whatever is required to make them run? Which is a better option? And to me, from a performance perspective, some of these oldies here will smoke any sub $200 saw, sub $300 saw you can buy in the market today, period. Except for the clone saws. That's, man, I'll tell you what, that throws a wrench into the argument, because none of these are going to run like a G395, and you know what I'm saying? That's like, just blows that whole thing out of the marketplace. But all these are going to run better than a Poland. So that 800-pound gorilla in the price performance is the Chinese clone saws, like the Husqvarnas. But I'm going to ignore their existence for the time being and just talk about vintage Swedish and American saws, German, I guess, if you want to go with steels, versus the low-cost homeowner type saws that are on the marketplace. We're going to focus on that. And I guess I'll just get to the conclusion immediately. It goes like this. If you're into tinkering, you like mechanical things, the vintage option is way better, because now vintage, 20 years later than when we first were talking about vintage, the performance is way more. You know, these saws here are way more than a cheap pull-in saw. Not even the same class. You know, these things here, they actually had figured out by then how to make power, and then make good power. So from a performance perspective, and if you're a tinkerer type, you know, these things is probably a good option, because it's almost an addiction once you get into it. Making them run and fixing them and doing work, they pay for themselves. If you're not into tinkering and you're not mechanical, yeah, you probably want to go down to the Lowe's and buy a new Husky 440E, you know what I'm saying? Or explore the Chinese thing. Some of those are pretty good. That Holzforma John Cutter 5800 was actually one of the best bang for buck saws I've ever seen, and honestly better than any of this stuff in terms of performance, in lightweight, stuff like that. But if you do like to tinker, you're into a little history, you don't mind solving problems, the only two options out there are stuff like this or the Chinese clone saws. But since we're not talking about Chinese clone saws, this right here is a good way to go for a hobby type. It really is. You know, see, for me, there's joy in taking something like that and doing the research on it to find out, you know, what it's supposed to be like and what parts are supposed to be on that saw, and then bringing it back to that level of performance the way it was when it was new. If you can do it, you know, that's fun for me. You know, some people that's not fun. And here's a 262 that Bob had given me. It's pretty much all OEM, and that's a nice saw right there. That runs good. You know, all these saws run good. So we're going to explore that, and I'd rather just show versus talk about it. But you know, maybe we'll do a cookie cut here and there so you can see the comparison like I did before. I mean, obviously, you get up into the $600 range and get into the 562 class or even the 550 class. Those things are hot rods. They're factory hot rods. They're going to outperform these things here. No question. But anyway, rambling. One of my purchases today is, again, this is exploring the low cost options that people have that are not into saws the way I am, and they don't have the same kind of connections I have. So really what they have to do is go to whatever stores sell chainsaw type supplies and pick through the product lines that are available. And PPEs, I think, are just as important as the darn saw. So we're going to try one of these. Spent 40 bucks on it. You know, Oregon used to make good stuff. You know, this is a little bit diverse. I mean, they're in the bars and chains is what most people think of when they think of Oregon, but they have other things. And of course, I've been a fan of the VersaCut for a long time. I think that's one of the best bang per buck bars in the marketplace in terms of lightweight and wear characteristics, you know. And we're going to try another one of these. It's been a long time since I played around with the Forester stuff I had in the past, but we'll just, you know, run them. We'll just see what they do. And I think rather than try to do that whole measuring thing where people will say, oh, this is better because, and they come up with some arbitrary measurement, I think the measurement that I'm going to use is, do they work for me or not? Are they available or are they not? And I mean, if this goes on my head, I don't get a whole lot of noise and it protects my face from chips, it's certainly better than not having one, and it's an option you can go down to any Tractor Supply and find. And the same goes for the county line files and basically chain maintenance thing. It's got files, flat file. We're going to run that on a couple of these chains, I think. And but this is the stuff that 90% of the people out there can drive on a Sunday and pick up, you know, at a Tractor Supply. Now I've been using the County Line bar oil for quite some time, and it works pretty well. So it's a lot less expensive than the brand name offerings from Husky or Steel, but I don't see any excessive wear in my bars. I've got a couple years on it now, and on the 28s it still seems to perform pretty well. But so we have a mix of pro saws, brand name Husqvarna, expensive, and old saws that were pro level in their day, and they're not very expensive. You can get this stuff for pretty cheap, but there's no clone saws this year right now. I don't have anything on the docket that I really plan to do. I want to stick with this stuff for now, understanding that the G395 is a game changer for me, and I guess the G288 was as well. I just didn't gel with it quite as well as I did the G395. So it'll always be in the back of my mind, but it's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about these, you know, Husqvarna John's Red vintage saws. Really the history, the roots of the modern saws we run today. So anyway, let's go see if we can take this thing through a muddy road, and then maybe break out one of these saws, put together that helmet, and do some clearing. I have a couple of trees that need to come down, blocked up, get out of the way for the trail. Oh yeah, see, part of what's happened here, right, is I can't skid through here anymore because I'll be skidding through a cornfield. So I have to change the roads I had. I used to have the road come up over here and then go along that fence line. Well, that fence line's going to go away after 20 years. And you can't see it here, but up over the bank down the other side, there's a place where we were working. I did a bunch of video over the last couple of years, and I had built the road from the south side into that area, but never brought it all the way through to the north. So one of my jobs, before I can really get back to felling trees, is I have to develop a road from the woodlot that we were harvesting this last winter through that section. You can't see it from here, obviously, it's on the other side, and connect up with the road that we were using, I don't know, 3-4 years ago. So let's go take a look at that with the Kubota. Let's go for a little trip and see what that's going to look like. Well, obviously four-wheel drive and medium was easier because I could crawl up on top of the, the ruts. Instead of being in the ruts, I can crawl up alongside the ruts because I had the steering with the front wheels to pull me up out of the ruts. So that was an advantage. But it gets around my farm. I mean, obviously it works. So it is going to be the designated saw wagon. I'll do all my felling first instead of coming out with a tractor like I used to. Of course, real early on, I used to come out with a quad. I had a Suzuki 4Runner and then a Suzuki Rincon, I guess it was. I can't remember what they called it, the 500cc single. I still have it, just haven't run it for a long time. But this allows me to just put my saws right here in the back. Come out here and do the work I need to do. Whether it's a fence, well, we're out of the livestock business and the hay business, so now it's going to be focusing on wood, felling, and firewood. I guess it's not completely 100% out of the hay business. I have another 100 acres of fields I have to maintain and do, but I'm not going to do them. I'm going to organize having it done because all my hay equipment is with somebody else now, and I've got this instead. So that's the wrap. I think I'm going to do a little bit of work, put the camera on it, try that helmet, and then we'll call this a video. I mean, check this out to give you an idea of the stuff that really has to happen. Is these beech, they've got the beginnings of blight. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But look at this beautiful tree in the middle. If I can get rid of this stuff here, maybe that's what I do today instead of getting in the tick land, is knock down a couple of these so that this one right here will get resource. That'll turn into a nice log someday, So in order to do that, oh man, look at all this stuff that has to come out of here.